Welcome to the South Florida M&A Advisors Podcast, your trusted M&A team. Here's your host, Russell Cohen.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the South Florida M&A Advisors Podcast. I'm your co-host, Jeremy Wolf, joined by your host, Russell Cohen. Russell, good to see you again.
All right. Thank you, Jeremy.
Yeah, man. So we were talking about the biggest sale in South Florida M&A Advisors history, $100 million deal with a roofing company that closed recently. Again, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
So I know you wanted to talk a little bit more about that because there's so many different components to a deal like that. And there's so many different factors that go into it, one of which is networking capital. So why don't you start off by giving kind of an overview of what that is for people like me that don't even really necessarily know what that term means. And then we can get into how that posed challenges throughout that process of that sale.
So the basic definition of networking capital is if you go on a business balance sheet, you got the current assets and the current liabilities. So the current assets minus the current liabilities will give you a networking capital. So what a private equity group will do is they'll go back 12 to 18 months, assuming if a business has consistent sales and EBITDA, they'll go back 12 to 18 months and get an average of net working capital. If a company is on a hockey stick growth, then they're going to take a very close look at the last 3 to 6 months, and they're going to look for an established working capital. Now, so the net working capital is probably one of the biggest deal killers in an M&A transaction. Your advisor needs to be bringing this definition and explaining to you net working capital on the first meeting, because basically what you're doing is you're getting a great multiple of your EBITDA, but you're leaving money behind to run the machine. A business owner builds this monster of a company, and it's a machine, and it needs money to function. For the private equity group or family office or the private company that buys it. So they're going to give you great multiple, but you got to leave money or accounts receivable behind to fuel the payroll, to fuel the overhead. Because they're buying a pipeline, but they got it. They're not going to front your expenses. They're not going to let you get a great multiple and then you take your AR and run out the door. So basically, what happens here is if you are want a larger type buyer, the quicker you grasp a net working capital, then the more likelihood you can get to the closing table. So I bring it up front. And it's very important that we calculate the net working capital early before we find a buyer. And it's important that you calculate the net working capital while you're in the quality of earnings. And it's going to get calculated at the end of the deal. So if we're doing it 3 times along in that process, when the private equity group or the buyer comes up with the net working capital, you're not surprised because you've been educated. So that is very, very important. And sometimes you could have your CPA do the net working capital analysis. And if your CPA is not interested in being there by your side, we work with fractional CFOs that will hold your hand through the entire process from the accounting side and make sure your business is PE ready. So net working capital, the quicker that the business owner takes on that definition and understands the process, the better chance they will get that major payout 6 to 12 months later.
So is there kind of like a standard? I mean, I know you mentioned sometimes you can go back 12 months, 18 months. Sometimes if there's a hockey stick growth, they'll take it for 3 months. It seems to me like you'll obviously get a better picture of the state of the business over a longer period of time. Is there a standard that you typically apply to take those points of net working capital throughout the process?
I mean, most companies will do 12 to 18 months. Most companies are not on a hockey stick growth. They're more likely stable, or sometimes it's declining, which is not a good trend when you're trying to sell your business. So when if we go into the roofing deal, we were dealing with a hockey stick growth, right? It was going from a 13 million EBITDA to a $20 million EBITDA. And so, looking back, that discussion was not done in the beginning. It was not done in the middle. It was done at the end. And we had a major challenge because the private equity group did their calculations, and they had a lot higher working capital versus what the seller thought. And it ended up being there was something on the balance sheet that caused the net working capital requirements to be calculated higher. So this could have been avoided if we if at that time took the approach to do it early in the middle instead of waiting to the end of the deal. And it created a lot of instability in the transaction, and it almost blew up the transaction. There was, you're trying to avoid seller frustration. That's the goal. So in this case, we were able to work it out, but it was unneeded stress by all parties, unfortunately. So,
was there any reason why you didn't do those calculations earlier on in the deal?
I was not personally running the deal. I was leaning on my M&A associate, and he's brilliant. And for some reason, he did not do the beginning, middle part of the net working capital. So going forward, as I run my own deals or I partner with my other M&A associates, I've made it. Now that I experienced it, I try to bring in the fractional CFO very early, because typically the spouse or the CPA, it's over the spouse's head when we start talking that, because they're not QuickBooks Pro advisors, they're not a CPA or high-end accounting person. They're doing the books and they're getting their way through, but they're not an expert. They don't have 75,000 hours of accounting to become an expert. So I try to recommend to the sellers to bring in the fractional CFO. They will clean up. They will start working on the net working capital analysis. And then as they get into the QuickBooks or the Sage books, they start seeing issues in the books.
Yeah.
And the CFO would then say, you're really not private equity ready for the eyes of private equity, because sometimes in a larger deal, they got to be GAAP accounting. Okay. And none of these small businesses are based on GAAP accounting. So we're trying to get it as very close to GAAP accounting as possible. And so when the CFO gets into the books, they go into their general ledger and they see some funkiness and they start correcting it. And once we can get everything corrected, now we can do the net working capital analysis and educate the owner on how much money they're going to leave behind based on today. And once again, we get to the quality of earnings. Well, the accounting firm, the Q&V firm will do the same, and we'll do the same. And at the end of the deal, everyone does the calculation and it becomes part of a contract. But there's always a paragraph in the letter of intent that talks about net working capital. So it's brought up early, it's in the LOI, and we need to address it early to get to the finish line.
Yeah, I think this speaks to the fact that every business is different, right? There's no two that are the same. So when engaging in a deal like this, there are going to be so many different factors to address, and there's going to be a lot of curveballs that are thrown up. There's no textbook blueprint on how to handle the perfect deal, because every business is different. So It is a learning process, like with anything else. And you go through this. Issues come up, you figure out how to fix them, and then moving forward, you apply that. That's how you become a master at your craft, right? Through practice, through trial and error, and just continuing to grow and getting better. So it seems like you're doing that beautifully, brother.
Yeah, and bottom line is, if a business owner who spent all the years building their business and they want to dance in the multiples of private equity, they have to, these are professional buyers. They know they do this on a daily basis. The business owner does not. That's why they're hiring an advisor like myself. But they have to address this particular point. And the quicker they believe in it, support it, is when they get that great payday. And it's a great payday, no doubt. And if you build a great company, multiples can be 4, 5, 6, 7, 8x, of your EBITDA. Those are generational numbers, generational retirement numbers.
I was just writing that down. I love that. Dance in the multiples of private equity. Yeah. Is that original to you?
Yeah, that's what I said. Yeah, I didn't copy that.
I love that. Dance in the multiples of private equity. I had to write that down. That's good stuff, man. All right. Cool, man. I think we'll end this segment there. A lot more to talk about. Like you said, there's so many different components to this deal, so I'm sure we're going to pick up some other things in future segments. Anything else you wanted to share about that topic?
No, I think we had a good basis of that, and it's something that a business owner will have to, if they want to exit, they need to be embracing that concept.
All right. Russell, sounds good. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in, and we will catch you all next time. Everyone, take care.
Thanks for listening to the South Florida M&A Advisors podcast. For more information, visit southfloridama.com or contact 954-646-7651.